We're just letting people into the round table, but we're just giving some people some time to join. I want to welcome you to our first education roundtable of this year. You see what I did there? I'm hoping there's going to be more. I'm going to ask that everyone puts their cameras on, for those who can. Of course, some of them, I know the time zones don't allow for that. The aim of this education roundtable is really to have informal discussions. So this is opportunity to chat amongst one another, hear from one another, and we will be recording the session because we want to make sure that we capture all the amazing ideas. We'll write it up in a blog post and share it with you later. So let's just give a bit more time for people to join, and then we'll get started.
Lisa, do we want to know who's going in first? I think we can go via alphabetical order.
Yes, so I think let's get started while we wait for more people to join in. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for who's joined. This is our first roundtable for the year. We're very excited to hear from you today. If you can, put your cameras on. We would love to see your lovely faces. And this is a very informal chat. So as you go through the discussions, there's a panel discussions. We're going to ask some questions. Feel free to pop it into the chat window. We'll make sure it gets addressed by the correct team members. We don't answer all the questions today. There will be a follow-up. There's also a WhatsApp group that we've created. We'll share the details with you afterwards. And this is really to continue this conversation. We've seen and had the privilege to deal with all of you, and we think there's such amazing use cases and innovative ways of using chat, and hence the reason for today's session. So without further ado, Pippa, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. Yeah, as Kanya said, it's a very cold calling in from Cape Town today, but it's so nice to see everyone's faces. And I think the impact team, which I lead at Turn, I mean, we're putting our heads together every day trying to figure out what different ways we can help all the organizations in the Chat for Impact community have more impact. And as we've seen kind of the growth of education chatbots, not only within our customer base, but those globally, we've thought, okay, well, how about we have more informal learning opportunities to share amongst each other, to share what we're doing, what we've learned, but also what the challenges are, and having kind of a really frank and open conversation around, you know, where are we going, what are the challenges, and how we can all help each other get there. Ideally, you know, as a collective, as we share our knowledge and we grow collectively, we all will have more impact. And I think now, being the time that everyone is starting to experiment with large language models, you guys in education were actually ahead of everyone else in introducing AI into some of your chatbots, specifically all of those of you on the panel today. And so we're really excited about learning from your experiences there, so that the next wave of organizations who are starting to just be introduced to these technologies can learn from your experiences as well. And there are lots of unanswered questions in that sense. So having everyone's opinions on where these types of tools are useful, where your chatbots have had success, where not, and what experimentation you're going to be doing into the future is all really exciting. So no further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our panelists today. So first up, we have Abdulhamid Hadar from Darcel. He's one of the founders, and he was part of the Accelerator, Chat for Impact Accelerator last year, and we're lucky enough to meet him in November. So very welcome, Abdulhamid. Nice to have you here. Next, we have Clotilde de Maricourt from New Globe, and we started working with New Globe back in 2020 during COVID. So we're really excited to hear about their learnings over all of this time, as well as their plans for what is next with their chatbot and how they're integrating it into home learning. Next is Shabnam Agrawal, who's just back from being off, so very excited to see her again, who is the CTO at Rising Academies and has been instrumental in building Rory, their chatbot, which has just today, Shabnam, I'm not going to share your good news, but it's very exciting news that I hope Shabnam will share in a few moments about the success of where Rory and Rising Academies is going. And then we have Sam Wheeler and Simon Woodhead from ED, who are going to be sharing about their experiences building chatbots as well in the math space in the UK. And so extremely well-rounded panel for you guys today. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Abdulhamid to introduce us to what they're doing at Darcel.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can all see my screen. Great. Hi, I'm Abdulhamid Haidar. I'm the founder of Darcel. First of all, thank you, Tern, for bringing us all together. It's fantastic to see a community building around chat and education. Darcel is a US-based 501c3 nonprofit. We are focused on improving learning outcomes in resource-constrained settings with a primary focus on math in low and middle income countries. And we are fully dedicated to chatbots. So our core product is a personalized learning chatbot that allows students to practice and learn math through channels like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. And it's a very simple chatbot that exposes students to hundreds of thousands of curriculum-aligned questions that we have developed. So we ask students questions and they answer. And they will typically answer these questions from home using a household device rather than their own. Everything we do is personalized, so our algorithms are constantly trying to identify learning gaps and figure out where students are getting stuck. And then they will provide students with hints and explanations, which are designed to help students catch up and reach kind of the learning metrics that are aligned with their curriculum. And it's also designed to be fun and engaging. So we have a lot of gamification and motivational messages in order to keep students engaged. Now, this is primarily all built for students, but we also work very closely with teachers. And actually, teachers also through WhatsApp access reports on their students' performance, and they use these reports to encourage students and motivate them. And it's these kind of simple teacher interventions, which only require a few minutes of extra effort every week, that really kind of drive a lot of the usage that we see. We are focused on partnering with ministries of education. Our biggest program is in Jordan, where just this last term, the ministry formally adopted Darcel for grade 7 math at a national level. So we've had over 50,000 users from 2,000 public schools across the country use it in the last few months. And we're now working with the ministry to expand our content beyond just grade 7 math to more grade levels and eventually beyond math as well. We've also launched pilots in countries like India and Nigeria, and we're also working on expanding there as well. Obviously, a very big part of our work is, beyond the chatbot and the tech, is figuring out the right way to work productively with these kind of education systems, because we believe that the impact can be maximized if we're working through these education systems, because we're mostly focused on reaching the students who have really fallen behind and who kind of by their own won't access kind of the existing resources. So we spend a lot of time on making that work, and to do that, we've built a lot of gamification, not just for students in the classrooms, but even for teachers and for districts, which are in a way competing with each other in order to kind of maximize adoption. And that's been also a very big driver of success. Let me pause here. I look forward to your questions. And should I hand it over to Clotilde or?
No, it would be to Edie, but thank you, Abdulhamid. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, I think we have like just 2 minutes. Thank you for doing that under 5. Also, feel free to put your questions in the chat. We are monitoring that as well. Great. Now, if there are no questions for Darcel, Sam,
Hi.
over to you.
Cool, thank you. So hi, I'm Sam at ED. I'm the product manager here. I'm going to do a brief demo of our chatbot and talk a little bit through that, and then I'm going to hand over to Simon for any other insights or thoughts that he wants to add. So let me share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that. This is a lesson that I've already started, and the idea is that we kind of started from two separate companies, one who was specializing in diagnostic questions, creating these questions that would hopefully identify what misconceptions students hold, and the other company was specializing in online kind of face-to-face maths tuition. And the diagnostic questions always had this ability to identify those misconceptions, but not necessarily resolve them. And so we built these chatbots as a way of attempting to be able to resolve the misconceptions as well. So what will happen is a student will click an answer, and it will determine whether or not it was right or wrong, and then give them feedback specific to the misconception that we believe that that student has, and give them a chance to have another go. And again, they'll either get it right or wrong on the next go. And regardless of what happens, they'll be then asked to choose some practice activity, so they can do some additional questions, or they can watch videos to kind of help them with that. And the practice content is all different types of questions. It could be kind of text or image based, and it will depend on what topic they're on and what activity they selected. And I think one of the really important things for us is that we wanted students to be able to still connect with a tutor if they needed help. So we've included this option for them to ask for help from a tutor, and then the tutor can join that lesson and send a message, which I'm using a pre-written one that someone had already written for the student earlier on, so that was there, and the child can then reply stuck or whatever issue they have, and then the tutor can respond to that to help resolve their misconceptions. And so that's the chatbot in a nutshell. It is, I guess we've been running this now for a few years, and we found it to be around 90 to 92% effective at resolving misconceptions, which we're using quite closely with schools, and reducing the amount of workload that teachers have to do to kind of resolve those misconceptions. I think that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Simon. Do you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks for doing the demo. I'm head of data and truly terrible at giving demos of the actual product, because I never see the product. I see databases. So yes, so yeah, no, that's a great demo. And just to kind of highlight a couple of points there. So Sam talked about misconceptions, and so one of our kind of historical points is that we were kind of came out the idea of formative assessment, and a particular form of formative assessment, which is multiple choice question, where some of the incorrect answers are chosen to highlight common misconceptions which students might have. And so we already had kind of a fairly substantial catalogue there, going back now about 7 years. And now with the chatbot, we have 2 to 3 years of dialogue between both the student and the automated rules-based agent, but also the student and the tutor. And the product also has a school component, so there's also an opportunity there for kind of feedback from teachers. And so what we've been collecting unintentionally over time, completely fortuitous, but we've collected lots of these kind of open dialogues, and we are now looking at using that for things like ChatGPT integration, and we have some experiments there. However, we are definitely not keen to experiment on the students. So we're fortunate that we have teachers in there and we have tutors in there. So we're using both of them to provide a human in the loop solution. So effectively they provide I wouldn't say cast iron filter, but it's like a pretty good filter for the content that's created by the language models. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to for now. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Simon. We're going to leave questions for later at the very end. So let's move to New Globe. Clotilde, all yours.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tanya. Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. I'm Clotilde. I'm a learning innovation manager at New Globe. New Globe is an education provider. We operate low-cost private schools and government schools in 12 programs across 6 low and middle income countries in Asia and Africa. And our WhatsApp chatbot that I'll be presenting was developed during the COVID-19 school closures. So most of the pupils that we serve do not have like sustainable or very good access to technology. So we wanted our tool to be low tech and to be free and easily accessible for our users. And WhatsApp is something that a lot of parents and guardians in our communities have access to. It's free to use, doesn't require a lot of data. So that's why we decided to use that as a platform. And I'll just do a demo. Great. So everyone should be able to see my screen. Okay, so this is the WhatsApp. And when a user starts, they are asked to register to take some quizzes. So here I've already registered, so I'm just going to. And then it asks the user to choose from a range of subjects that they can take quizzes on that were all written by our internal teams. And then within each subject, there's a range of topics that they can choose from. So some of our topics, there's thousands of quizzes that a user can choose from. One. And then multiple quizzes per topic. And so here I'll just do a few questions for each question. So user, I'll just choose a random answer, and then it would give them adaptive feedback. So here, if the answer is incorrect, it would tell them the correct answer and give them their score before moving on to the next question. So yeah, we used this tool during the COVID school closures, which at the time we saw a lot of engagement, a lot of pupils who didn't really have a lot of other means of continuing to learn while they were at home. And I think one of our challenges since then was that once schools have reopened, we've kind of been thinking about how to maintain engagement. And so that's something that we're currently working on. We've done some tests for like different engagement strategies, including, involving teachers to make that not to replace what is being taught in the classroom, but to complement it, for example, by using it as homework or revision for exams. And during the accelerator, we also brainstormed a lot of ideas and how we can work with a Turn team to brainstorm and think about how to improve our platform. So we've now also got a few ideas in the pipeline, and our new product team internally is also going to be working on making some improvements in the near future. Okay, that's it from me.
Thank you, Clotilde. And last but not least, Shabnam, Rising.
Hey everyone, my name is Shabnam. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Rising Academy Network. We are also an education provider that builds low-cost private schools in Africa. And we also work with government schools to partner and help operate those schools. And we also make education technology products. And one of those tools is called Rory. It was built out of a COVID era sort of shift in our work where we started doing some of our classes through radio. And then we saw so much engagement on those radio lessons that we decided to turn it into a chatbot called Rory, and host it on Turn. So I'm going to also give you a quick demo. Actually, the demo I am going to give you today is our demo bot. So it is some of our more speculative work that we've been testing out. And similar to Simon's comments, we also are quite cautious about using some of these ideas directly on our students before they're fully tested. So this is stuff that's still sort of in beta or in experimentation. I'm just going to see if I can share. Am I a host now?
You are.
Share screen. Here we go. Sorry. All right, here we go. All right, so I'm just going to actually give you a quick demo of our generative chat work. And what's really cool that we actually have live in our tool as well is that we have started implementing natural language processing. So when students have questions or answer questions with words of a number or a sentence, for example, like I think the answer might be 18, we're able to handle all of those answers, which is really nice. But this demo is actually just going to show you quickly how our generative chat works. So let's say I'm ready to get started. We won't look at the privacy policy just now. Oh, right, this is our diagnostic actually. So let's see if I can get into the menu real quick. All right, well, I'll just show you the adaptive diagnostic for now. And so this is another speculative tool that we've actually worked with Edie on to try and understand how to place the student in the right sort of level and complexity of mathematics. So let's just quickly go through this. I'm going to randomly choose some answers and see if I can get into, yeah, here we go, generative chat. All right. So let's say that we want to talk about making mistakes, which is one of my favorite topics. So the idea really here is we're trying to test out and play around with how we can allow for a limited number of conversations and sort of put the guardrails on the discussion that a student would have with a math tutor / chatbot, and kind of contain the conversation, but still support them in a generative way. I'm not going to go through the entire conversation now, but I thought I'd just showcase that and kind of show that some of the more exciting stuff that we're working on. But of course, the demo line is available, or sorry, the live line is available to play with if you want to as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for that. I think we've got a few minutes for any questions you all might have about the intros that the participants had done. Any questions from the crowd? And feel free to unmute, or you can use the chat function.
Hi, everyone. Maybe I could just ask the question. Apologies, I don't have my camera on. I'm just in transit at the moment. But my name's Andrew. We've been playing with something sort of quite similar, I think, in many ways in South Africa. One of the things we really struggle with is working out sort of the appropriate level and how we sort of place learners, and especially in a context like ours where there are significant backlogs that learners were carrying prior to COVID, and that's just sort of exacerbated further. I'd love to know sort of how you've worked that out. I know sort of we obviously know a lot of the Craig Barton work and stuff that probably I think is what underpins some of the EDI's things. So I'm assuming there's some diagnostic tools there that are really useful, but where do you put someone in the grand scheme? Because it's such a massive, convoluted, complicated map. That's I'd be fascinated to know. And then for the Darcel piece, I'd be so interested to know a little bit more about what info you feed back to teachers and what you're getting back from your teachers in terms of what they're finding useful and how they're responding.
Darcel and Edie, please feel free answered.
I can answer on the kind of positioning students, if that helps. I alluded to some kind of data that we'd collected over a few years, and that was all to do with how students have answered these diagnostic questions. On top of that, we did some work around predicting how students would answer questions they haven't answered yet. So that's a standard problem of imputation. And then on top of the imputation model, we built a model which would choose the next best question for a student. So that's a problem called active learning. Basically with that model, when a student starts, actually every student gets the same first question, but from then on, based on whether they get that question correct or incorrect, you can decide the next best question to ask them. And best is kind of, in this sense, is determined as the one that provides the most information about that student. So you don't want to ask something that's too hard, and you don't want to ask something that's too easy. So we actually just do a 10-question quiz like this when people on board, and we call it a dynamic quiz. And this is what we were sharing with Shabnam. And then after they've completed that, we predict how they would answer all of the questions in a big topic pathway that we developed. And on that, you can then say, okay, well, they're going to get most of this stuff at the beginning correct, or they're going to get most of this stuff over there incorrect, but there's going to be hopefully a sweet spot in the middle. And then we position them on that pathway. That's what we're doing at the moment to level students. And we can actually rerun that to try to re-level students again as they go through. Happy to talk to you about that. Just reach out. I'm sure our contact details will be shared. But at the moment, we're working on maps of learning maps of how different misconceptions are related. And so there's a different, more active way of directing students. But yeah, that's in development.
And let me just add, so we do something actually very similar to what ED does, where every time that a student answers a question, that feeds into our kind of probabilistic model, and then we run a kind of mini algorithm to figure out what the next kind of best question could be. So kind of fundamentally very similar, all built on this kind of massive convoluted network, as you said, of like math skills and concepts that we're trying to kind of guide students through. But we also allow teachers to determine what units or what kind of topics they want their students to be focused on, and that becomes kind of the target for every journey. With regard to the reports, there's kind of broadly two types of kind of insights that we give. The first is on just activity, so who's being active, who's solving, who's engaging, you know, what percentage are correct. And actually that's what most teachers actually engage with. And they use that primarily to motivate students and just give them that feeling that someone is kind of tracking what you're doing on this WhatsApp chatbot. And then they will often kind of, clap for students or give them kind of extra grades or kind of even give them certificates based on that. The second and more interesting part is insights on where students are actually getting stuck, because this data can help teachers then adjust how they spend review time, for example, or any personal interventions that they're doing with individual students. We haven't had as much luck getting that to be used. I think most teachers, just given kind of the burdens they have and just all of the things that they have to do, are mostly just looking at the adoption numbers and motivating students. But one of the things we're working on now is trying to make it easier to use these insights so that we can unlock that secondary kind of learning pathway of not just helping students on the chatbot, but also using the data to kind of feed back into what's happening in the classrooms.
Thank you, Abdulhamid. Robert, you raised a question.
Hi, everybody. Rob from Indonesia, Prestasi Junior Indonesia. A couple of questions which are quite relevant to all speakers. I'm just interested to know how you maintain student interest in the programs that you've got. What incentives or what structures, what strategies do you use to ensure that, first of all, students maintain an interest in what they are currently doing, and perhaps even more importantly, they revisit, so they come back another time. I'm just thinking about the sustainability of your program as far as from the perspective of the users. Thank you.
I can perhaps start. So a couple thanks. That's a great question, Robert, and an important one, because obviously we are not talking about schools here. We're talking about, bots that require the user or the learner to sort of be engaged enough to return and continue learning. So it's a very relevant one, and one that we struggle with. Definitely, a couple strategies we've employed with Rory is that we actually, at the end of any conversation, we ask the user when they would like to come back, and once they tell us, I want to come back in 1 day or 2 days or in a week, then we are able, through automated like outgoing messages to the user through WhatsApp, we're able to sort of ping them back in that period of time and ask if they would like to return back. So that's one strategy we've used that seems to work quite well. The nice thing about WhatsApp is that you are able to sort of engage in that way with outbound messages. Of course, it does cost money on WhatsApp, but it is one method that's worked quite well for us.
Thank you, Shabnam. Also, does anybody else have an answer to that or would like to reply to that?
Yes, I've got a few insights here. Yeah, I agree. That's a great question, and it's also something that we've been struggling with and we've been thinking about, especially since schools reopened after COVID, engagement did drop. I think, other than the kinds of things you could do on WhatsApp, like sending reminders, we've also tried to incorporate that more within the school, within the classroom itself. So we've done a few things working with teachers, for example, getting the teachers to encourage pupils before exams, for example, remember you've got exams coming up, this is a great revision tool, during school holidays as well. And we've also tried things like pupil competitions occasionally, between schools. So I think pupils generally have tended to find that quite exciting. They're competing against each other for who takes the most quizzes, and then would get a prize like sweets or a cake. Which, I think is not, something you could do every week, but something that could be done once a term, or something like that. Just these kinds of ways to make sure that pupils are also being reminded in school and by their teachers as well.
I think my answer was going to be very similar to that, really. We are working very closely with the schools, so we're getting a lot of the teacher involvement, so getting teacher buy-in, and they're setting these topics as homework, and so they're chasing them up. But also on top of that, we are, we've introduced similar things like competitions and leagues and various challenges where they'll be rewarded for working together as a class, and if a higher percentage of the class completes, then they'll receive a higher reward. We have also been doing some research into the areas of our chat flows that students prefer to engage with and the bits that they don't like to engage with, and we're looking to experiment with that a little bit and see, can we encourage them to engage with some of the other parts of it, or do we just need to remove those parts and put more focus on the areas that they seem to like?
Thanks, Sam. And Abdul Hamid, you also mentioned students and school usage leaderboards have been very effective for you, combined with recognition from teachers and the Ministry of Education. Awesome. Yeah. Anything else to add? You wanted to add, Abdul Hamid, on that?
I think very similar to what Sam was saying here again, and we have these award ceremonies at the end of every term, and kind of those also help get the word out. And they don't cost much, but they're actually very effective at motivating teachers, especially those from rural schools who don't typically get recognition for their efforts.
Lisa, you had a hand raised.
Maybe just sparking an idea and a thought. I mean, have anyone considered partnering with there's a lot of TikTok stars doing education on maths classes online. Have any of you experimenting to introduce your chatbot service that way? I know most of you partners with schools, but perhaps it's because I have teenagers in the house. I see that they follow a lot of these TikTok educators. Perhaps that's an opportunity to expand.
Yeah, there's
Look.
actually, Lisa, there's a group that both Edie and we are part of. And I think one of the teams in that group, I think there's about 5 or 6 teams, is experimenting with that. And it's been really interesting to see sort of the feedback. And I think they've actually got a TikTok, a like popular TikToker to do some of their educational videos. Am I right, Simon? Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. I think they're looking at kind of using some very clever video generation models to scale that one TikToker up to, are they TikTokers? I guess they're TikTokers. That's terrible. I really don't know. Yeah, but up to more content, which I think is a really cool idea. But in fact, they've found something quite interesting in that space, which is that people don't necessarily like really lifelike generated videos. Do you know what I mean? Or that they might prefer kind of cartoon versions of these TikTok characters. But anyway, that's different area.
Abdulhamid, anything from your end on that side? And Clotilde? Not so much. No, that's fine. Andrew had a question. Do these support offerings operate across different platforms other than WhatsApp as well? If yes, do you have to change the design or anything else? And then after that, I'll ping you, Gustav.
I'll go again. No, for us, it is exclusively through WhatsApp for now.
I can go next. Yeah, our main platform is WhatsApp, just because in most communities that's quite widely accessible. We do have two-way SMS, I think in Liberia only, where WhatsApp just isn't as common. And we didn't have to massively change the design. I think probably the main thing would be like no emojis or just like simpler format. But I think, yeah, as we improve our WhatsApp platform and we can do more there probably is going to be more of a gap in the format between SMS and WhatsApp. But again, this is just in one case that we have it.
We also use Facebook Messenger. Slight formatting differences, the way they do buttons, for example, is different, but by and large, most things transfer over really well.
Edie?
Yeah, so we I guess we're the naughty ones. We don't use WhatsApp yet. So we've built a custom website, which it's great in that you have lots of flexibility, but there's opportunities to be had by using existing functionality as well. We're interested in kind of exploring the efficacy of lessons in a kind of a custom solution versus a WhatsApp solution. So really interested in the difference, because things like WhatsApp, so Shabnam mentioned it earlier, you can send out messages. So yes, you can get people to say, yes, I will accept messages from this particular website, but how many people do that? So, but with WhatsApp, you could kind of do that. But on the other side, we have quite a lot of flexibility in that everything has to be built, which also time consuming. So yeah, so I'm afraid we're the ones who kind of sit slightly outside. We have the chatbot solution, but it's all outside of WhatsApp.
Thanks, Simon. Gustav, you had a couple of hands raised.
Yeah, I've got so many questions. I think maybe just you guys, a lot of you know me. I think one of the things I constantly think about, and I saw that with Darcel's model, is have any of you, I mean, apart from Darcel that I know was integrated directly, I think a lot of the reason why there was lots of traffic there because it was kind of an integrated part of the actual national system. So just looking forward a couple of years from now, I'm kind of asking, what do you guys think is a sustainability model that works. I mean, that kind of speaks to this question of making sure that people use it. One is a carrot. It's great, build a great service people want to use. The other one's a stick, which is, if you don't do this, you don't pass the grade. So I think, not that I'm saying either is better or worse, but just wondering whether, have any of you thought in the long run, do you see your model, or you see I'm sure there'll be an environment where there'll be lots of different models, but do you foresee yourself being part of like an integrated system where this becomes a national thing and all parents have to use it and it's kind of signed in, I would say more like the way DASAL currently works, but Abdul, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's not how you intend it to work, or do you see the ultimate version to be more a market-based approach where it's like on the free market and people say, I've got a child and I want to pay for the service. So I'm just interested to hear how people think about these services scaling long term and how they kind of get integrated into the public sector or not.
I think for us, we're a bit in the middle of the road, actually, Gustav, and you're probably more familiar with our our model than others. But just for everyone else, because partly Rising is a education provider and we work so closely with governments, it is a fundamental piece of our work, and it is something that we believe Rory can be used at the national level. And in that case, maybe we find, a funder who's interested or a government who's interested in adopting it at the national level. But I would say that the market-based approach is something that we see as more scalable as well, and more sustainable, like you said. So, we may not make the whole product a paid product, but perhaps have top-ups or additions that are paid. So for example, if you want a human tutor to support you for half an hour, maybe you pay for that. And we've seen other organizations try that and be somewhat successful with that. So that's sort of the idea we're going down.
I think in the long run, we'd like to replace physical worksheets as the place where students are kind of doing their homework as part of the formal curriculum. Having said that, accessibility is always a challenge, and even if 99% of students have access to WhatsApp through a household device, if 1% of students don't, then what does the government do then? So for now, WhatsApp is optional, it's opt-in, and it will be for the kind of foreseeable future. But kind of the goal is to eventually have this become formally part of the education system in a way where everyone is doing it, and maybe even where it becomes formally a place where assessments are taking place and where kind of what's happening on DARCEL is feeding directly into the into scores. We're not there yet, and these accessibility challenges are one big reason why, but we hope to get there eventually.
Go to you, Simon, Sam.
I think at the moment we're working very closely with schools, and we're fairly committed to keeping as much of the product free for schools to use with their students as possible. And as a result, kind of the main approach we're taking is trying to loop in the parents and getting them involved with some of the kind of the more premium features, like being able to ask for help from a tutor. I think long term there is some goal to be able to work directly with the parents, and the platform is set up for that already, and to not have to necessarily engage the schools. But that's where we're at the moment. Simon, is there anything to add to that?
I lost someone else. No, I think that's about right. I mean, even with the parent products, there's kind of quite a few free things. So I think there's always a bit of fun with freemium models of working out where to draw the line of what you charge for. But at the moment, that line is drawn when humans are involved. So as in human tutors. And then we're able to quite clearly say, you can have access to human tutors through ED for a fraction of the cost of having a real human tutor. for now.
Yep, I wanted to give you a chance for Pippa.
Yeah, no, I would say for us, quite similar. Like I think we do want to make sure that our tool stays like free and accessible for the pupils it's aimed at. But yeah, I think, and we are also like, yeah, we're working with teachers, but also with parents. Like it is an at-home learning tool before anything. But I do think it's the kind of tool as well that we see as like a good selling point for governments who are interested in partnering with us as well. Not as something that like they would own, but it is something that we can provide if they partner with us as well.
Thank you, everyone. Pippa, I also saw you had a question for Abdulhamid about the reports. If you wanted to kind of double up those questions.
Oh no, don't worry. He answered that one earlier. All good. I'm fascinated to hear around the premium put on the tutor. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I'm in light of everything happening with LLMs and these studies that are coming out that are saying like they're beating doctors at being empathetic and all sorts of like that. Do you envision a future where there's still, I mean, I envision a future where an LLM is really great at like really, really good at being a tutor, like fantastic, better than potentially better than a human now, but that there's still a premium on the human because people like and want to have that connection. And it's also my theory that is, I need someone to help me prove it, is that the accountability factor really matters. In your case, it's often the teacher, right? Keeping that student accountable. In other cases, might be a doctor or that. But do you see that as a future where there could be remains a premium on that human touch?
Was that specifically to Edie, or was that to everyone?
Edie, for Shabnam, and I'll mention it as well. Either of you.
Oh right, yeah. Well, Shabnam has something live, obviously, in the product, so she'll be able to give more comment on this. But my personal opinion is that the ability and quality of the LLMs will continue to be far ahead of its acceptance. So I think this is and it's actually a wonderfully painful problem if you've existed for a little while. I mean, we're not Amazon, but we've been around long enough that we have a bit of a reputation, and we don't want to ruin that reputation by like jumping too quickly. Yeah, I completely agree with you that there may be a time when they're very, very reliable and they're doing a really, really good job, because we're judging them currently at a different standard, aren't we? We're saying, oh, it made a mistake, therefore it's no good. Whereas we don't say that about humans, right? So we say, oh, well, you made a mistake, but you know, it happens. So I think it's going to be quite a long time before people accept that, particularly within education. Yeah.
Raul, was your hand up to answer the question or to ask a new one?
Yeah, maybe just to add something that we've seen.
Rory team, everyone.
Yeah, sorry, I'm on the Rory team. So, okay, so here's an interesting thing that we've noticed is that when you use the LLM, you need to basically brief it every time you want to use it, right? So you need to set some kind of context. And how you set the context, exact wording you use to set the context can give you very different outcomes out of the LLM. So there's probably a huge emerging field in writing and sort of creating content in a way that the LLM can effectively use it. And also writing kind of, so in other words, if you wanted to be a tutor, you need to write context for the LLM in a certain way that you get maximum effectivity out of it. And if you have math content that you want the LLM to consume, you probably write it in a completely different way from which you would write the math content for a person to consume. So, and this is literally just this field has just opened up now. That didn't even exist 3 months ago. So I think, so in other words, it's almost like we need to understand how to tutor the LLM so it can tutor the students, right? And also we need to know how to structure math content so okay, for non-math things, obviously we need to tutor the LLM for that kind of stuff. So for in the example that Shannon gave, like making mistakes or a growth mindset or something like that. So how do we write prompts for that kind of tutoring? And then also, how do we write math content? So a whole new category of math content that people will never see. Only people who are going to actually see that math content is the LLM, and the LLM is then going to serve this math content to the user. So yeah, so I mean, it's really an interesting question, but I think that's the future. The future is creating technology, whatever it is, to make sure that the LLMs stay within the bounds, and to make sure the LLMs serve it correctly and serve it in a way that the students, you know, get optimal use and utility out of it.
One thing I would add, and this might be a bit contrarian, but I do feel that as we just noticed, we don't know how to, the right form of calling a TikToker. Younger people adopt newer technologies much faster than older people do. And so one thing that I think would be interesting to test out in regards to your question, Pippa, is actually letting the student decide, like, do you want to use generative chat and talk to a bot, or would you prefer to speak to a human, and observing sort of what the student behavior is? Because my guess is that they will start to trust the bots more than the human, at least compared to our generations. And so maybe more willing to even pay for that sort of premium feature that is a bot rather than the human being. So that's just, yeah, some contrarian view I have.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thought, actually. It might flip on its head.
Can I
Sam?
jump in? Yeah, we had some feedback from some of our students on that. Some students just thoroughly did not like the fact that they might have to talk to a real person. And so even when they really needed help, would just refuse to press the request help from a tutor button because they did not want to speak to a real person. We also get quite a lot of people who then do go on to, I say quite a lot, but you know, a number of people who go on to actually speak to a tutor, a real person, who then don't believe that it's a real person, and they are questioning them and trying to figure out if they are real or not, which is quite interesting.
Thanks, Sam. I think we have time for one more question. And New Globe and Edie, you had some questions that you listed in. I think we spoke a little bit about the LLMs from Edie. So Clotilde, you asked, which question would you prefer to ask, about the bottleneck or the user data for analytical purposes? That you had listed. I think one of them was, what would you say was your biggest bottleneck in sustaining consistent user base? And the other one was, how do you use your user data for analytical purposes? Which do you prefer?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the second one. I think the first one was partly covered by Andrew's question.
Okay. Yep. So Clotilde had a question, which is basically, how do you use your user data for analytical purposes? Opening to the floor.
Oh, sorry. Let somebody
Yeah,
else.
good.
No,
No,
you go, Shabnam.
I mean, Raul can speak to this more because I just came back after 4 months of mat leave, but we've done some really cool stuff from what I can see on the analytics side. So for example, we've got something called a question explorer, which basically shows us all the questions that we have on Rory, and how, and like the frequency of students getting that question right or wrong. And what that enables us to do is sort of take a step back and view both like where we have bugs in our own bot and where we have bugs in the content, but also where students are struggling the most, or maybe where we have certain terms like place value, for example, that is not so easily understood in our context or in our countries. And so it really, those analytics allow us to kind of iterate on the quality of our content and sort of the contextualization of the content as well. I don't know if that, am I answering the right question? That's how I understood.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think we we went with open-ended responses early, which is actually a great thing to do, because we've got we get such interesting responses. It's not even so our responses are NLU processed, as Shabnam mentioned, so we can reduce text back to numbers, and we can reduce sentence answers to single digits. And sometimes we can understand a whole bunch of stuff. They're not everything, obviously, but then what we can do is, with our question explorers, we can see frequency distributions for certain kinds of answers, and that helps us understand like how, what else we need to be able to understand. So we use the frequency distribution of answers, and especially the edge tails of what people are answering, in order to then train our NLU model to accept better responses from the users. And also then, obviously, as Sharma said, if we have a question that 100% of people get wrong, we know there's something wrong on our side, right? We've got our instructions are incorrect. Something else is happening there. So that's very helpful.
And Abdulhamid, thank you.
Very similar to Rory, we for every question we look at what percentage of students skipped, got it right on the first chance, second chance, and that helps us, fix our hints if if they're not being clear, or the explanations. And we can also track after a certain after a certain question has been presented to a student, a number of times, are they still getting it wrong, or are they actually eventually kind of progressing to more difficult questions? And that's another point of feedback. But we also collect a lot of this kind of insight from teachers. So whenever bugs go out and there's something wrong with the question, or as Roel said, sometimes a student puts in the right answer, but we can't format it correctly. Like our WhatsApp gets flooded with teachers complaining and sending us screenshots from students. So we get a lot of that kind of more informally as well, because we're on these WhatsApp groups with all the math teachers in the country. So whenever something happens, they kind of find their way to us, and that's been a nice supplement to the actual data reports that our content team gets.
Thank you, Abdulhamid. So I know we're about to wrap up. If we don't mind going a little bit over time for about 5 minutes, I just wanted to open last questions to the floor. Anybody had a last question before Pippa wraps up?
Can I just add to that last one, unless somebody's going to ask a question? Yeah. And so I think everyone's talked a lot about learning analytics, which is a really powerful idea. And often the things which teachers are finding really useful are the things which data analysts find far less exciting. So I did a wonderful sunburst diagram, which it sounds laughing about now, because I really liked it, and some teachers liked it, but it was but maybe not the most popular. So sometimes it's surfacing insights for actionable insights. That's what we're kind of aiming for now. But there is a whole area as well, which is sharing your data. So we do a lot of work trying to anonymize our data and then share it with people who know how to do stuff better than we do. Because we're just a small startup, and there's researchers in this space who just know everything. So why try and recreate the wheel or whatever, reinvent the wheel? No, that's one. So we've hosted a couple of competitions at conferences, machine learning conferences, where people just use our data, and then you're getting some fantastic minds working on your data effectively for free. So that's another way to use all the data collecting to make your product better.
Thanks, Simon.
Quick plug, I do host a data science and education meetup as well, so if people are interested in that, I'll share the link.
Yes, Simon, if you could share the link, that would be really wonderful. Thank you. If we don't have any questions from the floor, I'll hand it over to Pippa. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say a huge thank you. This has been for those of us who are not education experts, this has been a fascinating learning experience. And I think we could carry on chatting for a lot longer than just an hour. So I think, Lisa, your premonition in the beginning of that, this is the first of many roundtables that really want to continue this conversation. But just to recap a couple of things that really stuck out to me I think we chatted a lot in the beginning about, you know, how do you figure out which level a student is, and you all have similar ways of mapping students, and there's definitely a follow-on call that's being asked for about more details into that. And then we talked about, you know, maintaining user interest and whether, you know, do we take a carrot or a stick approach, and what strategies everyone has been using to keep engagement. And we talked about things like reminders, teachers encouraging students, prizes, leaderboards, and also recognition, and TikTokers as well. So I think a lot of interesting things to try and test across these services, and to keep sharing what we're learning about what's successful in different areas would be great. And then on the sustainability piece, I mean, it seems like on the continuum of carrot to stick, everyone's kind of trying a little bit of a combination of both, working really closely with education providers or governments, if they're not education providers themselves, and also acting using some market-based, you know, carrots as well, in that sense. And yeah, obviously it was my question, but the human versus LLM future is fascinating. I think ones we're going to learn a lot about as we're all testing in the coming months and weeks. And as we pointed out, that we are not the youth, and their perceptions of using these tools are going to be different from ours, and their perception is going to change as we all learn more about what these tools can do, what they're good for, and what humans are good for. And so fascinating. I mean, really excited about the learnings that are going to come out of all of your experimentation in that area too. And then last but not least, the thing we all come back to is, are we actually improving people's education, right? Are these chatbots working? How are the analytics we're collecting helping us build better services, and ultimately helping all these students pass maths for the large part, which is extremely important. So I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone again for taking all this time, and really looking forward to the next session. I'm going to hand over quickly to Lisa for some next steps.
Thanks, everyone. Yes, I think mine is more practical. I just want to say thank you for your time. I know that it's, for some of you, it's quite late into the evening, so I'm really thankful for that. In the chat, we have shared the WhatsApp group. So that's a Chat for Education WhatsApp group. Feel free to join it, invite your colleagues, and it's really a place to continue this conversation. It is a closed group, so you'll be accepted to that, and share articles, share the stuff that you're busy working on. And then lastly, the team here on the impact side, specifically Nathan and Tanya, has recently published a formative assessment playbook after interviewing the teams at Rising and ED, and have a look at that, and maybe that can help you build out your chat service on Turn even better. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a fantastic day or evening, and we'll chat to you soon.